Yo, YouTube, what is good? Today I'm excited to bring you a video about the new changes that are coming to Mage in the 11.1 patch. This patch is still a bit a ways out, so these are future changes that we're looking at, not changes that are currently reflected in the game that we are playing now. So as you can see on the screen, I have clipped out the Mage related changes in this patch. Scrolling through a document on Wowhead is never fun, so I decided to get all the information here in one spot. So player versus player changes. Let's read here from the top. The developer's notes. We're making updates to PvP talents focused on removing, replacing, and modernizing our designs to encourage talent diversity, save keybinds, and reduce complexity in carving new gameplay space. So essentially, with these upcoming changes, you will see a couple that are revolved around reducing complexity. Now, this is something I think retail WoW has needed for a long time. One example that is being fixed in this patch that is needless complexity is the frostfire, excess frost, and excess fire. So excess frost now triggers when you consume excess fire, and excess fire now consumes when you trigger meteor and comet storm. Already that statement probably made you guys like say what the hell, like what even is all of that, right? So these are procs that you previously had to track, and it was very annoying to have to track these. It felt like, man, I just have to add another weak word in my screen or another tell me when to track this proc. Essentially what they're doing it now, essentially how they're doing it now is they're making all these things that previously you had to proc, they're tying them to abilities. So it's whenever you cast this ability now is whenever you get this buff. So you don't have to track it now because it's like, oh, I just cast Meteor. Now I know that I have an excess fire. Previously, you would get this when some stacking random buff that you had hit 6 stacks, which means you had to track that one to see when it was about to hit 6. And so, yeah, you can see this is definitely really cool. Our updates for Frostfire Mage are focused on reducing the intensive to track auras and make the talents more connected and conducive with each other. So now that we got past kind of like what they're going for here, the developer's notes, it's time to get into the really good stuff. So the player versus player changes. This is where the juicy one is, okay? Mage, new PvP talent, overpowered barrier. All barriers absorb 100% more damage and have an additional effect, but they only last 5 seconds. So let's go down the list. Ice barrier. If the barrier is fully absorbed, so this means you use ice barrier and then they burst through it, breaks the barrier before it runs out of that 5-second duration. Enemies within 10 yards suffer massive frost damage and are slowed by 70% for 4 seconds. So big snare, massive frost damage. We have to see how much frost damage that actually comes out to be. The Wowhead tooltip is 650% of your spell power. No one really knows what that means, or even if that's accurate. So that one is probably my least favorite, but it is pretty cool. You know, it's essentially it just depends how much damage. I will rescind my statement that it is the least cool if I find out that when people break the barrier, it actually does a sizable amount of damage. So I think that would be really cool. Then we have Blazing Barrier. This one I love. It's my absolute favorite. Reflects 100% of the damage absorbed. So if you attack into Blazing Barrier and they are running overpowered barrier, you will reflect all of that damage to yourself, which I think that's so cool, man. And I'm just now envisioning the PvP talent on fire that also makes Blazing Barrier do 800% more physical damage when people attack you, like the Thorns effect that it has. So Blazing Barrier is going to be very dangerous to attack into, I think, if you're running this talent on Fire Mage. Then we have Prismatic Barrier for Arcane Mage. If the barrier is fully absorbed, gain Time Warp for 4 seconds. So this one, I'm actually going to take a second to Alt-Tab over to the PTR calculator. And One thing that is interesting that you'll see is overpowered barrier on the PTR talent calculator has a different tooltip. So I'm going to move it over here so you guys can see it. Read that bottom line there. If barrier is fully absorbed, your next blink or shimmer within 15 seconds grants invisibility and immunity to damage for 3 seconds. So I don't think this is the one that's going through, unfortunately. That one sounds very cool. I would have even taken just the invisibility part, like, you know, I thought that would be even more cool. The on-demand time warp is cool. The only problem that I do have with it is that it's whenever the barrier is broken, so people can choose to not attack into it, which is going to be, I think, what happens most of the time. Depends on how big the barrier is. It does last for 5 seconds, so I think a lot of people will try to burst through it. They're like, oh, it's only 4 seconds of time warp. It kind of feels bad to wait to have to do damage to do that. The arcane barrier is also very strong. It's the one that has the strongest effect. So will you run this talent on arcane? I'm not entirely sure. Another counter synergy that overpowered barrier has with the mage tree, which I am not a super fan of, is energized barriers. Casting your barrier removes all snare effects. So I feel like that gets a little bit of or actually, sorry, I'm completely wrong on that. That has no counter synergy. For some reason, I thought overpowered barrier increased the cooldown of barrier, but that's not the case. So we are indeed good on that. There will be no cooldown increase, which is really cool. So again, I think this new talent is very, very insane. And to me, that's the biggest one. So now we're going to get into some of the other changes. So as you can see, I put a little red line next to this one, indicating that this one is an actual nerf to that ability. So Ring of Fire has been redesigned. It now disorients enemies who enter it for 3 seconds and burns them for 3% of their maximum health over its duration, was 18%. Cooldown increased to 45 seconds and replaced Ring of Frost. So lots of negatives with this talent, but I will say this about the Ring of Fire nerf, is that Ring of Fire was an ability that gate kept Mage from being buffed in other areas, because Ring of Fire was so strong that our class would keep up with other classes in details, and a large part of that damage, a majority of the time, was Ring of Fire. So it gave the illusion that Mage was doing a lot of damage, right? In like almost every game. So I think with the removal of Ring of Fire as a damaging ability is really going to open up buffs for other abilities in the toolkit that are maybe more fun and more iconic. Ring of Fire playstyle is very dampening, very, put a dot on the target and then the health ticks down. It doesn't even really feel like you're doing anything, right? So I am all for this change. It is a nerf. If they do not, buff another thing, we will do less damage. Also, I think this talent could have some merit. Like, it's an AoE. You can basically think of this talent as a ring of Dragon's Breath. It's a ring of Dragon's Breath. You put it on the ground, people who walk through it get DB'd. I don't know. It's kind of cool. It would, I'm almost thinking maybe it doesn't even have a DR. How crazy would that be? But I don't think that's the case, because it says disorient, so it's clearly a disorient. But I think it's really weak in this state. Don't think you'll play it. So yeah. However, it is interesting if it does not break on damage, because you'll see it burns for 3% of their max health over its duration, which implies that they're going to take damage in the disorient. So we'll have to wait and see for that one. Then we have another nerf here. So this one is alter time is now affected by healing reduction effects such as dampening. So this one is quite significant. However, they could have nerfed alter in a variety of different ways, and this one is the most tame way. So this is the one where I don't mind it as much. Like, it is a nerf. It does suck. If they would have messed with the cooldown, if they would have messed with any way that the ability works, right? Like maybe you can't go back early. Maybe the duration is shorter and it's not purgeable. Or maybe, there's a million different ways they could have changed it. This one doesn't really change the gameplay part of it. So you'll still use alter in the same exact way. It's just going to be weaker in dampening. So to me, this is fine in my opinion. I think you already have a immunity, which is a very important cooldown in dampening, and classes that typically have 2 of those is kind of too strong. Like, let's look at Holy Paladin. They have Lay on Hands, which doesn't affect dampening or healing reduction, and they have Bubble. But I think we can all agree that 2 like healing reduction and dampening style things, like an immunity or something that negates healing reduction, is pretty strong to have 2 of those. Most classes don't have that. So this one for me, again, it's fine. I would not freak out. I know a lot of people will probably see that and freak out. Another one is Temporal Shield PvP talent has been removed. This was nerfed by like 60% and affected by dampening. So really not like too much of a nerf to Arcane. However, it's kind of sad because I think Temporal Shield is a really cool ability, and I think it's a very hard ability to use to its, potential. So for me, that one, I dislike seeing it go. Hopefully it comes back, but it was kind of useless in its current state anyways. So we'll keep this bottom talent here for after we read through some of the other changes. Also, I apologize if I'm stuttering. It's like 7 in the morning. I just want to get this video out. So let's move on to some of these other changes. This is the top of, if you guys know how patch notes work, at the top there is a section that is related to PvE. However, all those changes apply to PvP unless stated otherwise. Then there is a PvP section, which is the one we just went over. But I wanted to give you these changes first because those are the most exciting. So now we're going to look at some of these other cool ones. So Polymorph buff, guys. Polymorph buff. Polymorph buff. I will add there was a Cyclone nerf, which is an indirect polymorph buff. All right, this is crazy. It's not too crazy, but it's still crazy. So polymorph now breaks based on a small damage threshold. So I'm assuming this means something like Ring of Frost. We all kind of know how that works, right? When you Ring of Frost, you could like Cone of Cold the Ring of Frost, right? Or maybe even Fire Blast it, and it wouldn't break it. That's what I'm imagining polymorph. So it's still going to break pretty easily, but at least it's not on 1 damage, which I do really, really like that addition. A little smiley face next to it. Also, they nerfed the health regeneration by 50%. This one to me is weird because it almost like counter synergizes / makes Master Shepherd a little worse, but it's still good. Now if you don't take Master Shepherd and you sheep someone, instead of just like instantly topping them, it's gonna just be a little bit slower. So that's kind of cool as well. Now we'll go into some more of the Frostfire stuff. So we talked about this a little bit when we were at the front of the video, the complexity part. So they're changing how Excess Frost and Excess Fire are proccing in the hero talent tree of Frostfire Mage. So basically they're just removing the fact that you have to track certain things on your screen by making it tied into certain abilities. So we really like that. The rest are not too important. So we'll go back and we'll look at some of the Fire Mage stuff. The Arcane and Frost PvE changes are really insignificant in my opinion. I think there's like a little bit of the tree is moved around, but yeah. And then for Frost Mage, it's mainly Blizzard and Orb stuff, so nothing really worth going over. The link will be in the description if you guys want to check out all the notes for yourself, but we're going to go over the major ones for this. So the first thing is we will just read the developer notes. Let's keep in mind this is in the PvE section, so this isn't going to directly relate to PvP, but it's still important to note. So Fire's resource economy post Lore Within has been too generous, so which means too much instant casts, too many instants, too many everything, which has made certain spells like Fireball and Scorch feel unnecessary, while also impacting how we can tune Pyro and Flame Strike. So basically what they're saying here is we have too many Pyroblasts coming out that we can't buff Pyro. All right. Our goal here is to reduce your access to Phoenix and less so Fire Blast while amping up your spenders to help increase skill expression, increase your reliance on casting, and make your exciting spells hit a bit harder. We'll be monitoring these changes and adjusting accordingly. Now, I think some people are going to see one thing and get very scared, and that is increase, where the hell is it? Increase your reliance on casting. I think that is scary for some people, right? But what that really means is like, instead of now literally only ever doing Phoenix into Fire Blast into Pyro into Instant Scorch into Phoenix into Fire Blast into Pyro into Instant Scorch, it's like, well, we kind of want to fit a Fireball in there. Like, I don't know if anyone's played Shadowlands, but you remember having that big Tinder Fireball before you go? Like, yeah, you had to cast a spell, but damn, it made the rotation field so smooth. So implementing some casts into the rotation helps the spec feel fluent, helps it feel fun, and it really helps when those casted spells are meaningful. So right now, all your casted spells are just not meaningful on Fire Mage. So I'm excited for that. That also means that they can just buff the damage on them since they're less frequent occurrences. So we really, really like that direction for Fire. I like that a lot. So let's look at some of these changes. This one will freak out majority of players. Heat Shimmer has been updated. No longer makes Scorch instant. Now increases Scorch's damage by 10%. So let's tab over just a second to look at Heat Shimmer on the tree here. So let's scroll up and switch to the Fire Mage. Now Heat Shimmer was right here. Essentially what this does on the current game is it makes your, it's the same thing here. Doesn't increase the damage, I believe. It's just damage from Ignite has a 5% chance to make your next Scorch deal damage as if your target was below 30% health, and it would make it instant cast. So this is actually a buff to Scorch because they're making the damage a little bit higher now. And they added a PvP talent called Ignition Burst, and that is going to allow Heat Shimmer to make the Scorch instant cast and cast it at 100% effectiveness. So I think that's pretty cool. I think Fire Mage was in desperate need for more PvP talents. So we actually get to keep the instant Scorch too, if you want to play the PvP talent for it. So I'm imagining a world, right, where you're playing like Ignition Burst, overpowered barrier, because I think OP barrier on Fire is actually OP, reflects 100% of the damage. That's crazy. And then imagine you play something like Fireheart too, blazing barrier damage increased by 800%. Like, that barrier is lethal. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think there's actually like things that you want to do now, because it's like, what if you want to take Ring of DB too? You could go like Ring of DB, OP, barrier, and Ignition Burst. But now it's like, well, Ice Wall is really good in this meta, and like players are getting really good with Ice Wall. How the hell do we fit Ice Wall in there? Well, it's like, okay, well now Ring of Fire replaces Ring of Frost. I wonder if you can pick like, okay, I'm just gonna start putting stuff into the tree so I can move down. But I wonder if you can pick Ice Nova. Like, if you pick Ice Nova, will that replace the Ring of Fire? If not, like, you can still play Ring of Fire and just, you know, run Ice Nova, which is cool. But it's like Ring of Fire is a CC talent now, so it's like you're gonna take that over Ice Wall. Yo, imagine you have an Ice Wall down and you put a Ring of Fire on the edge of the ice wall, and then players walk into it and get DB'd. I guess you could just do that with Ring of Frost, though. Yeah, Ring of Fire to me is confusing what they're doing with that ability, but we'll see. But yeah, it's kind of cool that you have some stuff that you can do with your PvP talents on fire now. So I like that. I like that a lot. All right, to get back to some of these notes here. So Pyroblast damage increased by 10%. W. You know, this definitely needs to be a bit more in my opinion. I don't know, especially now that we're decreasing the occurrences of them, because you can see that Fire Blast cooldown has been increased by 2 seconds now. So this is kind of honestly not that big of a nerf. I already felt like you were overcapped on instant cast anyways. So it was usually pretty difficult to run out of abilities to generate Pyroblasts. So to me, this might make it in a spot where it's like, oh, I might actually have Fire Blast downtime now, and I might need to actually sit there and cast a Fireball or something. So, yeah, I don't mind that. I mean, they even buffed Pyrotechnics, which is, you know, every time you Fireball, if it doesn't crit, it will crit, which is kind of cool. And then they're adding, like, you know, Master of Flame damage increased on Fireball. When maybe Fireball is actually going to do damage now. Maybe it's actually going to be worth to cast it. And then I don't believe, by the way, that when there's something here that says like increases damage and Fireball's damage, or sorry, increase ignite and Fireball, I don't know if that counts for Frostfire Mage either. You know, like, does that mean that Frostfire Bolt damage is going to be 15% higher or something like that? Probably not, would be my guess, but who knows. And then, yeah, you can see down here we have the Ignition Burst talent that we were talking about that I just wanted to include in there. So that's about all the changes that we have for Mage, guys. I hope you guys are excited as I am for this kind of stuff. I think these changes are honestly very, very exciting. I'm glad that they're kind of taking this direction of reducing complexity. I saw another article where it was like they're going to try to tackle add-ons in a way somehow as well. So I thought that was kind of cool. Maybe, you know, WoW PvP is going to start feeling like it was back in the old days. We'll have to see. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. I'll be out. Peace.